Hey, Dave Kaplan.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. And thank you for time on your agenda. I know between your biennial budget and your comp plan and everything else, having been a council member, I know that your time's precious, so greatly appreciate the time this evening. Last Monday, the Sustainable Airport Master Plan, near-term projects, National Environmental Policy Act, environmental assessment was released to the public, starting the 45-day comment period on the Sustainable Airport Master Plan, which has been in development for the last decade. Next slide, or first slide, please. Thank you. Why are we doing the SAM? The growth, especially in passengers, is consistent and strong in the region. We see slightly more passengers actually by the end of 2024 than we did in our record-setting year in 2019 prior to the pandemic. The airport capacity baseline study, which the Puget Sound Regional Council published in 2021, showed a strong correlation between the region's population growth and airport activity. Forecast for future demand is very strong, even when new capacity from SAMP is assumed, which it is in both the PSRC study and the state airport capacity planning. Without new facilities for future projected demand, people will still travel, but congestion at SEA will increase, causing additional delays and worsening level of service. There's some key factors in our population which drive the demand: business growth, international business and leisure travel connections, well-paid jobs, companies and schools based here who attract residents. These are some of the reasons people travel to and from Washington State. With the forecasts in mind, the port began developing the master plan, which looks at the entire airport in an effort to propose airport improvements needed to meet that future demand or portion of it. This work is one of the earliest efforts to actually bake in sustainability directly into the planning and not just as an approach later in project design. So the master plan at SEA is the Sustainable Airport Master Plan. The sustainability component of the plan identified where we build, and how we operate in the existing 3-runway configuration. As I noted before, we started the planning, I think, a decade ago. We went out to the public in 2018 for scoping on the environmental work that you're now getting a chance to review. So it's been 6 years. In fact, I think the last public open house was my first day at the port, to give you an idea how long ago that was. The schedule has been extended by the FAA many times, mostly due to COVID, and has directed several updates and new forecasts along the way. So we're not using the same information that we did at the time 2018 rolled around. The new assumptions are included and it's published as part of that environmental review. I go back too far? Oh, I see. There we go. All right. So as you may already know, environmental review under federal and state laws is done to assess how projects, if built, may impact the environment. It compares the proposed action, in this case, the SAMP, against other alternatives that could still meet those needs and against a no action scenario, as if no projects were built. The FAA is the lead agency for the federal review under NEPA. And in contrast, the port is the lead agency when we undertake the environmental review under SEPA, the State Environmental Policy Act. I have a short video to play now that hopefully will play.
In 2018, the Port of Seattle completed its Sustainable Airport Master Plan, or SAMP, for Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, or SEA, which outlines the growth strategy for the airport. This plan addresses increasing passenger and cargo volumes through a suite of projects known as near-term projects. Longer-term projects were also identified, which will require planning and environmental review. The purpose of the near-term projects is to address challenges like insufficient passenger facilities and cargo handling and outdated airfield design. By 2032, SEA is expected to serve over 57 million passengers per year. The projects include building a second terminal and roadways, enhancing taxiways, and ensuring that the airport meets FAA standards while improving efficiency for both passengers and cargo. We're also planning for increased fuel storage, including storage of sustainable aviation fuels. These projects are expected to be completed or well underway by 2032. Environmental reviews this year and next are the next steps for these proposed projects. An environmental review is an important process that assesses the potential impacts of a proposed project and no action alternative, and any other alternatives being considered in detail on the environment. It helps determine how the proposed project might affect environmental resources such as air and water quality, wildlife, traffic, and noise levels in local communities. The impacts of each alternative in the environmental review are compared to the no action alternative to determine if the impacts are significant compared to not doing the projects. Impacts expected to exceed regulatory thresholds are considered significant impacts, while impacts under the threshold are considered non-significant impacts. If significant impacts are identified, the review outlines ways to avoid, minimize, or mitigate these effects, ensuring projects can proceed responsibly while protecting both people and the environment. If impacts cannot be mitigated below the threshold of significance, additional work such as an environmental impact statement will be required. The environmental assessment performed for the FAA analyzed 15 resource categories for potential impacts and found one with significant impacts that can be mitigated by the port below the threshold of significance. This is surface transportation. To offset the expected transportation impacts from the near-term projects, the Port of Seattle will invest about $40 million in improvements to ensure smoother traffic flow in and around the airport. Detailed information on the findings, the resource categories, as well as how to submit a comment or attend one of our public meetings can be found online at the link in the description of this video or at sampntpenvironmentalreview.org. We encourage you to participate in this important process. Together, we're building the future of SEA.
The draft NEPA EA document consists of about 270 pages overall, 75 pages of text, and then graphs, tables, and other illustrations. It's broken into two parts, main parts. There's 7 chapters that summarize the actual environmental work, and then 15 appendices for each of the different resource categories that you're required to review under the National Environmental Policy Act. How do you access it? Well, you can access the document via the SAMP website, which is a separate website not affected by the cyber attack and the port's website being down for the outage. Physical copies are also at libraries shown and at the SEA Conference Center. So that is here at the library, there's a copy of the SAMP for you to be able to review. Is there a delay? Sorry. Okay, there we go. So agency and public comment period, as I noted before, began last Monday, October 21st, and will run through December 5th. That's a 45-day comment period. The standard comment period for for federal government under the NEPA is a 30-day period. The port asked for 60 and the FAA granted 45. We're aware that additional days have been requested for review, and Commissioner Mohammed sent a letter on behalf of the Port Commission to the FAA asking due consideration be given to the request that's received from the local communities. In addition, for public meetings, which are shown here, are identical, which will have identical materials, are going to be offered in different locations. November 12th in Federal Way, November 13th in Des Moines, November 14th here in Burien, November 16th in SeaTac. Comments can be made either from our website, from emailing the SAMP email at samp@portseattle.org, mailing to Steve Rybolt, the lead on the environmental for the port, and at the project website. There will be hearing examiner at the different public meetings to be able to take verbal comments, and there will be opportunity for people to fill out forms and be able to submit their comments there as well. As I noted before, at the website, you'll see next to on the second to the right tab at the top, you'll see an opportunity to be able to submit comments. Outreach and engagement. The documents which explain the environmental review process, the SAMP and the public comment process are on the website, including translations available in 6 different languages. And we are running advertising, port newsletter, social media to publicize the draft NEPA and the public comment period. As I noted, we requested an extension to 60-day comment and our support additional time for the communities to be able to weigh in. Targeted engagement with BIPOC and underrepresented communities with an emphasis in South King County. And materials include FAA approved SAMP airport layout plan and future demand from regional growth. In terms of language access, accessibility is a high priority for our outreach and engagement efforts. And as you can see, translation services are available in several different ways and different platforms, including at the open houses where they will be able to tap into any number of translations beyond the 6 that are in print. This postcard is going to be sent to approximately 126,000 residential addresses in the Highline area, essentially from White Center down through Federal Way. And this is to supplement the other outreach we're doing on the back side of the postcard. Next steps, which we expect to see happen this year and next year, are shown. The draft EA is out. Public comments will be made. The FAA will review the public comments and they will respond to every comment that has been submitted. So let me just reiterate that. They will respond to every comment that gets submitted. If the FAA finds the proposed action would have significant environmental impacts that could not be mitigated below the level of significance, then an environmental impact statement may be prepared. If the FAA finds the proposed action would not have a significant environmental impact, then the FAA will issue a mitigated finding of no significant impact, otherwise known as a FONSI, as part of their record of decision. The port will conduct a similar environmental review after the after the record of decision has been issued by the FAA. And again, just bringing this back, thank you for letting me share the information and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Dave. Any immediate questions for Dave? Councilmember Ake. Oh, sorry, this isn't, sorry, for the folks in attendance, public comment is later. Public comment is later.
Yeah,
If
this
you-
is just for.
So go ahead,
Council,
Councilmember
right?
Ake.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. This is great to have you here and thank you for presenting this. I do have several questions, that I'd like to ask. So there's quite a handful, so with some explanation, so I'll try and ask them one
I'll
at a
answer what I
time.
can. Go for it.
Under the category of cumulative impacts, the port's consultants, Landrum and Brown, listed Des Moines, SeaTac, and Kent as communities to be affected by the extension of SR 509, and concluded that project would not result in significant cumulative environmental impacts. But the Washington Department of Transportation estimated that at peak hours, the 509 extension would carry anywhere from 3,700 to 4,700 vehicles per hour. Almost all of that traffic will pass through our city of Burien. Can the port explain that discrepancy and the exclusion of Burien as a community affected by the SR 509 extension?
No, because the environmental impacts of 509 are specific to the 509 project and not SAMP.
Okay,
509 is not a SAMP project. The environmental review is strictly about the 31 projects that make up the Sustainable Airport Master Plan.
okay. We're looking at an increase from 423,000 takeoffs and landings per year to 540,000 over the next 10 years. The port's SAMP consultants acknowledge that these projects will lead to an increase in air pollution, but also say those increases are not considered significant. Do you have a sense of what the basis of this conclusion is about?
You would have to ask the experts at the public meeting what the standard is that the FAA is required to use under federal law for what constitutes significant.
Okay.
One second, Councilmember Ake. Let's see if there are other questions from, any other questions from council? Councilmember Moore, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate your coming out here. You show up all hours of the day and night to all kinds of events, weekends not accepted. And that really is seen and appreciated, including to tough audiences. And I suppose Burien probably comes into that category and as we might, because we live directly under the.
Well, I was in Des Moines last Thursday, so nothing like being in the home and getting questions, tough questions as well. So
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. The first one is about the areas under the flight path designated as high noise, the 65 DNL standard. And that area is shrinking because planes are quiet, but homeowners who previously had port packages are now outside the high noise zone and may not be eligible for new repair programs. Is that correct? And if so, how does that get justified? And does the addition of the more than 300 flights per day offset the reduction in noise from the newer aircraft?
you would have to ask the experts about the threshold levels relative to the number of flights and the quieter aircraft in terms of the cumulative impact there at the public hearing. I can't answer that technical question. I can tell you that we're currently, relative to the port packages that you referenced, we are in the process of evaluating the extent of what the impact is. We did look only within the 65 DNL for purposes of trying to get a a number we can get our arms around in terms of being able to do a fair evaluation. Once that report comes out at the end of the year, early next year, the Port Commission will make a decision on the approach that's taken relative to fixing port packages. And the program is named the Sound Insulation Repair and Replacement Pilot Project, or pilot program. So, yeah.
Can I ask just a little bit more and then I'll circle back? It's not so, the other things I'm gonna say this go around, and I'll try to have a second go around as well, is, they're more just observations from hearing the presentation. One is that I think that the title of the SAMP is confusing to a lot of people, the word sustainable. It's about, can the airport sustain the level of flights that are growing into the airport? And I think people hear that expression and think, this is environmentally sustainable. It's so cool that the airport is doing that. And I want to highlight that because that was my first impression when I heard the name as well. And I think it is important. There are a lot of kinds of sustainability, and the kind that is in that plan is really about, can we keep taking the growth of flights that we're getting? And it's feeling pretty unsustainable from the ground level, however it's going in the airport. The other thing that I just wanted to reflect on was that for an impact to rise above the level of, to the level of action compared to the no action alternative, is coming from an assumption that what we have now is okay. And it's, again, from the ground level, feeling pretty not okay with the level of noise and potential ultrafine particles.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Go ahead, Councilmember Reiki, you go ahead.
Just a couple more. So we address what we can. As part of a report prepared for the state legislature, researchers at UW warned in 2020 that UFPs could be a significant threat to the health of people below the flight path. They recommended extensive additional study of this issue, as well as comprehensive monitoring, assessment, and mitigation of airport-related pollution. What steps has the Port of Seattle taken to implement any of these recommendations, if any, and is there plans for that?
The University of Washington's initial move-up study looked at ultrafine particles and noted that the bulk of the ultrafine particles, by the way, are coming from automobiles and trucks and other vehicles. The ultra microfines are coming from aircraft. There have been other studies that have had health implications, but there has been no specific study to that. Their recommendation hasn't been followed up on. And by the way, the port helped fund that initial move up study. So additional study that would speak to any kind of causation and not just correlation would be necessary.
Okay. And just wanted to talk for a minute about the port packages. Going back about 30 years, the port has outfitted more than 9,000 homes with noise mitigation packages, the port packages. Many of those failed, and at present, there's no money to repair those packages outside of a very small pilot program the port is currently undertaking. The projects under consideration in the SAMP would increase takeoffs and landings at SeaTac by nearly 30%. What is the port's plan to accommodate Burien residents under the flight path whose port packages have failed, so that they are protected from the additional noise and other pollution that they will be subjected to with that increase?
Again, the noise mitigation is tied to the Part 150 program,
Yeah.
which was passed, the last Part 150 was passed in 2014, I believe it was. And the commission has committed to completing the first, that Part 150 in terms of everybody who's eligible, if they choose to, will have their residents mitigated for sound. The program that I mentioned before, the pilot program, is underway and it's separate and apart from the SAMP. It's not part of the Sustainable Airport Master. I don't know what else to tell you other than if you have specific questions as to the threshold issues, you'd have to bring that up with the experts at the public open houses.
Okay, great.
Councilmember Moore, do you have a few more? Go ahead, Councilmember Drive.
SeaTac, or Seattle International Airport, has grown to be one of the busier airports in the world. Given what we know, that we know so much more now about health hazards related to aircraft noise, would the port consider taking a leadership position in advocating to establish certain DENLs as appropriate standards for excessive noise? I know that 55 is right around the number, but I know that the measurement of 65 DNL is a threshold for high noise.
On changing the DNL threshold, and again, this is an issue that's separate and apart from the SAMP, but the port, along with the other CTAC stakeholder advisory committee members, went to Washington, D.C. to help advocate for legislation that would get the 65 DNL threshold reevaluated as a metric. In addition, the noise policy review that the FAA has undertaken, the port joined with the airport area communities through START to send a letter, a very comprehensive technical letter to the FAA, encouraging them to reevaluate the use of the 65 DNL as the threshold for noise metrics and to look at other metrics. So we have supported that and will continue to support a look at that.
Councilmember Moore, go ahead if you have a few more.
Sure, unless anybody on Zoom has them.
Doesn't look like it.
Okay, I'm happy to keep asking questions. The cumulative impact question in 1997, the consulting firm HOK warned that increased air traffic from the third runway would contribute to a cycle of economic blight in neighborhoods adjacent to the airport, and recommended 5 cities, including Berrien, receive direct payment to help offset losses. When I first met my predecessor in this position, Nancy Tosto, one of the things that she mentioned was that I think she gave the date of 2025 of when the airport was going to be at capacity. And it seems like it's finding ways not to hit airport capacity in all that time. But this has been a long time coming, and the impacts on the ground have been known for a long time. Is it time to start considering what can be done to mitigate this for communities through direct payment, to help offset losses in property tax revenue, or to help offer the municipalities relief through the King County Assessor or the Washington State Legislature?
I can't speak to that. I can't offer an opinion on that.
And my last question I have for you is really more for you as someone who's very familiar with all of this. We have 45 days, it could be 60, it could be 90 to read this. And you've probably read a lot more of this kind of material and have a strategy for doing so. Even with all the experts looking at it, I need to have my own understanding, and I think that's probably true for other council members as well, of a document that is monumental in size and scope. Do you have suggestions on how to go about trying to digest this monster?
Yes, the appendices are important because it gives you the technical review of each of the resource categories. And so focus on the resource categories that you think are the most important. You know, whether it's cumulative impacts, whether it's ground transportation, whether it's socioeconomic, whatever the categories are, pick those that you feel are going to be the most significant for you to review. And then take a cursory look at the others. That's what I would suggest. The things that are going to interest you most, the things that you're most concerned about. Because 15 is a lot of different categories, and some things are going to be pretty minor, right? There's some things that may impact, you know, or have implications for SeaTac or Des Moines that may not for Burien. In the same way, there may be something that may be of more interest or more concern to Burien than it might be to one of the other jurisdictions as well. So yeah, it's a big document, but I would read all 7 chapters. I would read the entire report itself and the graphics and everything, and then focus on which of the appendices and the resource categories that you think are most important.
Okay. Seeing no more questions. Dave Kaplan, thank you very much.
Thank you.